Hey everybody, this is Jim West, founder and CEO of TopCyberPro.com, and welcome to another episode of the Top Cyber Pro podcast. We have a great guest. It's going to be a long list here, so let me try to not mess this up. Okay, we have Dr. Chase Cunningham, aka Dr. Zero Trust. He is a CSO, author, podcaster, and he sits on multiple advisory boards. So, Chase, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate the short intro.
All right. Well, we're just going to dive right in. For anyone watching right now, could you give us, when you say zero trust, some people that would watch this have heard of ZTA, zero trust architecture, zero trust. They've heard about it. It's a hot buzzword, but could you give us a breakdown of, hey, bottom line up front, what is zero trust?
Well, I mean, the simple kind of geeky side of it is removing trust relationships from within interconnected networks. However, the simpler, non-geeky side is you ever been on an airplane?
Yeah.
That's a zero trust engagement from soup to nuts. And if you really think about what is required for you to get on that plane and fly to where you want to go, and the fact that it's a session-based deal, right? You get where you go, you leave, all those things, it makes a lot more sense to folks. So, ZT is not exceptionally complicated. You just have to be able to understand it from, other areas where you're currently doing it every day, all day.
hmm Yeah, because let's talk that through. You go to the airport, you first got to go to the ticketing counter, right? And so to get your tickets, and so you got to produce IDs like a passport, driver's license. You got to prove who you are, authenticate yourself. Then even when you go past that person, you have an official, like a security TSA agent that will check your ID again, and you got to produce a ticket to say that you are supposed to be traveling through this place. Then you go through a physical vetting, X-ray, the body scan. We all know that you got to completely get analyzed to proceed on into the terminal. And then even before you're board, they still want to see you produce the ticket again. And sometimes they'll ask for ID. It's optional that they can ask for ID. But yeah, you're right. There's so many checks, and you have to authenticate. You got to get thoroughly analyzed and inspected. You're absolutely right. That's a great correlation there, to what zero trust is and the approaches to it.
Well, and
So
you can take one other step there too and say even when you get on the plane, if you think about it, you have an assigned seat, right? So you're kind of like micro segmented to that
yeah,
seat.
I like
And
that micro
you
segmented.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, it also is one of those ones where you don't have permissions to be in the cockpit even though you're on the plane.
hmm
So just because you have a ticket doesn't mean you get to fly.
Yeah.
So I mean
So there's
there's
extra protected, controlled spaces on the plane. Yeah, you're right. There's the
exactly. So like
cargo
this
hold. There's
is
areas you're not. Yeah. And there's
yeah.
even policies and rules. For example, you can't smoke in the bathroom. There's all of these warnings and policies and strict rules that they have on planes. So I love that. That's a great example right there. The only thing, if you could only solve how we can make people board and put their luggage up in the overhead faster or take it down faster and deboard a plane faster, then I think we might be on to something.
I would love that because I fly all the time and it drives me nuts. Yeah.
I like to refer to these folks like when I'm in the security line and then they wait to the last minute to realize, oh, I got to take my watch off. I got to pull my laptop out. I call them first time flyers. There's always one, right, that's in the line ahead of you.
Hmm.
Speaking of flying to places and stuff, obviously as an advisory board member and with all the other work that you do, you're at conferences and events. So what has been some highlights that you would say for this year of places you've been, since we're talking about traveling?
Yeah, I think it's been a really interesting year because the whole ZT thing has kind of expanded globally. So I was in Colombia twice this year. I was in Taiwan twice. I'm going to Japan next month. I'll be in Switzerland and Germany as well. So like it's if you had ever told me that the international side of Zero Trust was going to grow to where we're starting to get invites from, different countries and nations that are partners and friends to us, I would have told you you're nuts, but here we are. So I
Yeah.
think it's a really good thing.
I get fed up because I speak at about 8 to 10 conferences a year, and I got real tired in the past 3 years of everything being almost 8 out of 10 AI focused topics. And so I've been speaking on quantum computing since 2017. And you mentioned Japan in that list. I spent a whole month in Japan earlier this year consulting and speaking, and I got to go to the Riken Institute, which was pretty cool in the Fujitsu lab.
Cool.
But yeah, I love to see that these different emerging technologies and security approaches are getting the time that they deserve. I guess their day in the sun, if you will. Because don't get me wrong, I know AI has been a game changer for a lot of sectors of different industries and will continue to advance and grow. But again, I'm super interested in the next disruptor, and quantum to me is that next big disruptor. But With that being said, you do sit on a lot of advisory boards, and like I said, you've been invited to go speak and advise, other countries and so forth. What has been some of the challenges you would say in trying to correlate the importance of zero trust, as well as try to demystify any kind of myths or perceptions that people may have, wrong perceptions of what zero trust can and can't do?
Yeah, I think honestly, the one that stands out the most is that we've kind of done it to ourselves as far as the cybersecurity community. Because for a long time, people in leadership positions had a blank check. If you said I was a CISO and I needed IAM and I needed firewalls and I needed MFA and whatever, you just got it, got it, got it, and they kept giving you money because they figured eventually you would get it right. Well, the well eventually does run dry, and that's kind of where we're at now. And the conversation that I'm having a lot with folks is okay, you probably don't need to get more money. You probably just need to realign your strategy and start leveraging that stuff the smart way. And it's difficult because I feel for the people that are security leaders. They're just trying to do their job, but you're trying to translate a very technical approach to a very strategic problem to people that understand strategy but not technology. So it's kind of, ice skating uphill. But I do think it's beneficial for people to bring in usually an outside agent, myself or someone else, because whether or not you want to give it the credence it deserves, like usually boards are willing to listen to people that aren't in the company.
Mhm. Years ago, I was a CSSC program manager and worked closely with the NSA and the PMO office for it. And one of the challenges I would have is that, a lot of folks weren't fully prepared. On paper, they'll read things like you need to have these particular roles, people with like certificate authority experience, CA experience, and all these things that comprise the solution. And at first, they would say, yeah, we could do it. But when you actually start getting, soup to nuts on it, it would quickly unravel for a lot of folks. And so, usually, when I talk about CSFC, I'll tell people, hey, plan a roadmap to it. Maybe today you can't immediately move over to the solution, but you can, take the steps along the way. And I advocate for a lot of folks. Even in my quantum computing brief, I talk about CSFC as being potentially a solution that people can move to and migrate to in the event that we have Q-day issues or where there's a quantum supercomputer that's wreaking havoc on networks. And, that's a potential future we may face. And, pending future algorithms and future solutions that will help, protect us, that today we could start taking like a tech refresh. If someone's got a planned network refresh they're going to do in the next 2, 3 years, look at the NSA, and it's public, folks. You can look up NSA CSSC program, and there's a trusted components list where these commercial products have been tested by third-party labs and vendors to meet the criteria of having protection profiles that can protect up to secret, and in some limited cases, TS, at least voice. And so that, I usually advise people start with that. If you're going to do a tech refresh, look at these components that have been vetted and tested that they can run a CSFC solution, and that gets you a step in the right direction if you ever needed to take the additional steps. And so, speaking of zero trust, I've had some conversations with the agency regarding how, zero trust borrowed a kind of a lot of elements of the CSSC program. Obviously, it's not two independent layers of encryption, but you mentioned IAM solutions, or IDAM is another acronym, Identity Access Management. It's kind of like IDAM and and IAM services kind of melded with a little bit of the different components of CSSC. Definitely, the encryption, certificates, etc., and that whole approach and strategy of, like you said, by default, trust nothing, and it seemed to be kind of like the almost like a child of CSFC. I don't want to completely say it's a one-for-one matchup because it's not, but it's very close. There's a lot of similarities. So, what are your thoughts on when people say, "Hey, is zero trust the strategy or method to protect us against emerging threats, future threats?"
Well, I tell people that honestly, I don't care about whether the threat is new or emerging or 0 day or APT or whatever else. Like the good thing that we forget in this space is there's some physics of how infrastructure works, right? And if I accept that, and then I also accept that the bad guy is also bound by those. If you kind of think about the Matrix movie, right, where what if you're in a world that's built on rules, that type of deal.
Yep.
You have to operate within those rules. And as long as I can apply the correct technologies and the correct policies strategically, where it's going to make the difference to remove the benefit for the adversary where they have to operate, they'll eventually lose. So
Mhm.
this is, it's a chess game that goes on nonstop. But I think personally that we have way too much kind of victimology in cyber. Like it makes me nuts when somebody says, "Well, the bad guy's only got to be right once," or whatever. No, the bad guy has to continually be correct to be able to move through your network and do the bad things that they do. So just remove one of those things that they have that makes them successful, and you take back the power.
Mhm.
Um, I think we rely too much on humans, honestly, and we should move away from that. Like fishing training makes me want to jump off a bridge. So there's better ways to solve these problems, but this is also a space that we kind of have thought we've been in for a lot longer than we have. Like most people don't really think about it and go, you know what, this internet thing, this cyber thing, it's kind of new still. So we're still figuring things out, and that's
Yeah.
okay. But we just have to be very real about the space.
Yeah. You mentioned fishing, and that's been like a big buzzword for the past 5 years, right? And it's like no matter how much training, how many, there's people that do, scenarios and they'll bring in a company that'll run a fishing campaign just to test their employees. But it's like, wait a minute, what you said earlier about we need to replace people with technology controls that don't need smoke breaks, don't need vacations. It runs 24/7. It's like, why don't we look at better email gateways, better email filtering solutions, just
Browser isolation, yeah.
yes. And so let's look at the technology side because, training's great for the general purpose of it, but it's not foolproof because people are to err is human, right? To really mess things up, you need a computer, but that's how the saying goes. But I'm 110% on board with you about putting in technology controls as you can and that are adequate. Why not solve it with a technology solution instead of relying on people to not click the links, right? Because you can tell them all day long, but someone's going to click the link and be compelled to, or just having an off day, they're half tired, just drove in and just click, and then next thing you know, your network's down, right?
I mean,
And
yeah, and
at the same
I'll
token, if
tell
it takes one
people
click, if one click on an email will take your entire business down, then you
you got a
got bigger
problem.
problems.
Yeah, and I mean, I tell people all the time, like, I've been fished. Anyone that tells you they've never been fished is a liar.
Mhm.
So it's just the nature of how these things are. And I think the stat that I saw recently is since ChatGPT has become globally available, fishing internationally is up
Yep.
4,000%. Don't try and keep up with that with humans. Just use tech.
Yeah, and also social engineering is back again, because we think that phishing is the big buzzword, but social engineering. Just this past week, I had someone call me out the blue. I was on the way home, and they gave me an offer for a job, and I was like, I don't remember applying for this job, but email me more information. Before I know it, I'm starting to look at their website and starting, I do my due diligence. I'm pulling up on their office addresses on Google and find out it's like a strip mall somewhere in New Jersey. It's nothing that looks official. The more I dug, within 10 minutes, I had so many red flags that I was like, okay, this is a social engineering attempt. And again, under the pretext of their pretext was a job working for Navy research and this and that. So it was like all up my alley. So they did their research on me, but yet once I started digging, it was clearly evident. But a lot of folks, in this day and age with government shutdown and with people there's a lot of cyber pros that are still looking for work and trying to be employed that I could see where these attacks can just only go through the roof. And even a year ago, we had the MGM casino hack, which was done through LinkedIn, social engineering privileged account users through LinkedIn. So, phishing, social engineering, these are the human element. We can't just rely on people always being 100% on it. And so when it comes to that, where is some of the aspects of ZTA? So for folks that are like, well, tell us more how ZTA can help with some of these things. Where can ZTA help shore up these issues that we're talking about, the human elements?
Well, I mean, zero trust strategically is basically the kind of mantra that you can put in place for all of technology to align towards security strategies. ZTA, zero trust access, and zero trust access controls. Those are great because we're pretty far along in the market overall. Like that's not what I would consider a brand new piece of technology, so that's good. But if you've ever used a system that requires you to do a multi-factor auth, like that's a zero trust access control. Or if you've moved from VPNs towards ZTNA, like those types of things, where it's a policy controlled, session based system that has some sort of out of band additional authentication, you're doing zero trust stuff. And there's some people that will say, oh, God, I hate MFA and whatever else. Like, look, man, it takes maybe 6, 8 seconds.
Few seconds.
Just do the thing. Someone will also say, well, that stuff's not bulletproof. Nothing is bulletproof.
Yes.
Um, but you're trying not to be the easy, low-hanging fruit, the slow gazelle. So this stuff is very useful, and if applied correctly, it makes an exceptional difference. And or and one thing I think people don't really understand, and kind of another corollary to your everyday life. You remember, like maybe say, call 6 years ago when you used to go to the gas station, you just zipped your credit card and you got your gas.
Hmm.
Okay, well, the gas companies had a problem with fraud because it was rampant, right? All they did was they moved towards making you either put your PIN number in or your zip code to correlate the card.
Yep.
They saw a massive reduction in fraud in like a month, like to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. Like that one thing is so valuable that it's worth it for gas companies. Why would you have a problem with doing an out-of-band authentication? It's not that hard.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's better to not be a victim than to be a victim. And as the timeless adage says, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Hmm.
Um, so with a lot of this advisory board work that you do, I want to kind of jump into that for a second. What are some of the challenges you find, when you're trying to advise businesses and guide them, try to, show them the way? What are some of the challenges you face as an advisory board member?
I mean, a lot of times it's the folks that they'll say, "Well, we haven't had a breach, or we haven't had," and it's like, Sure, I haven't had cancer either, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna start smoking cigarettes."
Hmm.
So, it's getting them to understand that there's an inevitability factor to this, and it's not a Chicken Little thing. It's just like statistically speaking, it is going to happen. I always say death, taxes, and cybersecurity are kind of the
Yeah.
three givens in any lifetime. But getting people to understand that even though you've done everything that you think you could and you're compliant and you're correct and nothing is happening, there's probably an issue that you should deal with, and you should start planning for the future migration, especially in security, because this space is moving so fast. Okay now is not okay 12 months from now.
Yeah. I one of the challenges I face when I'm doing consulting work is where it's similar where we don't have any problems, and or everything's encrypted. I get this a lot because I do work in a space like with CSSC solutions, and they're like, well, we already have everything encrypted, and then I try to explain to people, it's assume attack, right? So if you assume attack and assume a breach, what then? And of course they immediately talk about the incident response and so forth. I said, no, no, I'm not even talking about your IRP or your incident response team. Now I'm talking about how resilient is your operations data. So now we're kind of slightly touching business continuity in a way, but how resilient is your network that if you had to shut down a whole group of systems or, again, we talk about the microsegmentation. You mentioned about the plane earlier, and that's a part of zero trust, folks. Uh, are you able to do that? Are you able to do the isolation and so forth so that by the time your incident response teams come and so on and so forth, resiliency is a key word that I usually rely on. How resilient is your data, your operations, your network, and your activities that you need to perform to continue running business? And how does all of this fit into your business continuity plans? And they start to see gaps real quick. Once we started, looking at business continuity, looking at incident response, and looking at operations, you'll start seeing the gaps really quickly. And so I know we could talk for hours and hours on ZTA and cybersecurity, but I want to respect your time. So I want to talk about my favorite question for all my guests is you wasn't always level 99. You wasn't always Dr. Zero Trust. So let's go back. If we could go into the archive.org Wayback Machine and we go back to day one when a young Mr. Cunningham said, I want to do IT cybersecurity. This is the path I want to take in life. Is there a story there that you're willing to share with us?
Yeah, so I can say, just like, and my career has never been very well planned out. It's just been a lucky calamity of errors that happened to work out for me. So, way back when I was active duty in the military, I was actually a diesel mechanic, and we had gotten a piece of gear that never worked right, and it was computer controlled, and it drove me nuts because it was my responsibility to fix this thing, but it was never calibrated correctly. Fast forward. I took it upon myself midnight one night while we were out to sea to sneak up to the guy's room that I knew had the laptop to fix this thing. I brought it down. I literally stole it out of his stateroom while he was on watch. I took it down, plugged it in, changed some settings, uploaded, reconfigured, whatever, and the system worked flawlessly. Now, unfortunately for me, one of the other officers who was walking through the ship just doing a tour at 2 o'clock in the morning because he had nothing to do saw this and knew that I was doing something very bad. And he just looked at me and smiled and walked out. And I thought, oh God, I'm done. Like I'm busted. Fast forward about 2, 3 days later, that same officer came down to me and he goes, do you like being a diesel mechanic? And I was like, no, sir, I'm not even working on diesels. And he said, well, are you any good with computers? And I said, I'm relatively useful. And then he goes, would you like to be a cryptologist? And that was the start of my whole career.
Awesome. It's wonderful how just a chance meeting of two people and just a quick conversation and it completely changes the trajectory of your life, right? With that being said, obviously across your career, you've had mentors, colleagues, bosses, managers, directors, and maybe just other people that you didn't work with or for in industry that you admired or looked up to that had a positive impact or influence on your life. So the goal of this question is, are there any folks that you want to kind of pay homage to for saying, "Yeah, these folks have been tremendous in my life and career"?
Yeah, so John Kindervag, great friend of mine. He's one of the guys that introduced me to Forrester. I can't tell you how much I appreciate his help. All the folks at Forrester Research, Heidi Shea, Joseph Blankenship, Jeff Pollard, Stephanie Belloris, the whole team there, like they were just so instrumental to my career. Greg Toohill, great guy that I've known for a long time, has always been an inspiration to me. Herb Kelsey at Dell. The list is so long of folks who have been kind enough to give me a little bit of their time or whatever that's made massive changes. I would need 2 hours of screen
Just,
time.
just, yeah, just for that. You mentioned John. John has pretty much, I think he's the father of Zero Trust, right? Or the creator, the better term I think
Mhm.
he prefers. He's the creator of Zero Trust. I've had him on the podcast. So he was a guest on last season, folks. So if you want to check out his episode, I'll have the link to it in the description below. So you can just click on that and check out John's podcast. Really great guest and, wonderful human being on top of that. So let's talk a little bit about some other aspects of your career. You have a podcast, so let's talk about this podcast, and let's. What is the why of the podcast?
Well, the why is I just kind of didn't see a lot of folks that were looking at things from a perspective of like no BS and really giving a breakdown, not only from the technology kind of geek side, but also from what's the kind of hidden message that's going on in the space. And I just try and keep it as honest as I possibly can. And I've got 30,000 folks on the YouTube channel now and almost 300,000 on the Spotify. So, I mean, it's turned into something. And for one dude in his, garage without a marketing budget, it's turned out to be pretty fun.
Well, I tell you what, people always are going to gravitate to authenticity, and so as you say, you're keeping it real, and people love it when you keep it real. You have some publications, so let's dive into some of those. So, what are some of the books and publications that you have, and where can people find these?
They're all on Amazon. I've written, I think, 12 or 13 books now. I've helped on a few others. Honestly, I love doing the comics for kids. The Sinja series was great. I've really enjoyed writing my kind of cyber Tom Clancy novels, Gabriel and Variable. I'm working on the closeout for the trilogy there. And then I've written nonfiction books about Zero Trust. I've written nonfiction books about cyber warfare. I've written a book on how to basically make money in the stock market based on breaches. So, I just throw it out there, and I genuinely enjoy writing. So, if no one reads it, that's fine. I'm going to keep writing anyway.
Oh, I love it. So if you would send me all the links to those books, just give me a copy paste thing that I'm going to put in the description. So folks you don't have to, do the typing and searching. We're going to save you those searches by clicking the description and we're going to have all the links to Amazon to every one of his publications and check some of them out. If someone wanted to know just more about Zero Trust, let's start with that since that's the topic we talked most about. Is there a publication you have that you would say, hey, this is the publication if you want to read more and get in the know of Zero Trust?
Yeah, so there's the NSTAC, which is the National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee, has a publication out there that you can read that's a breakdown of what zero trust looks like, which is pretty good. I think NIST 800-207 is
Mhm.
also a pretty good framework to reference people. And then there's some books if you just look at zero trust from, I can't remember, I think Darren's one of the guys that wrote one or Damien, but it's on Amazon. Just look for zero trust architecture. There's 5 or 6 or 7 books. Any one of those is great to read. So I think that, there's plenty of people doing really good work here that understand it. And the good thing is it's a strategy that's broad enough that people can research and publish around it.
Wonderful. And also you have patents and I love to talk about this because I think I've only had one other guest that had patents and it was a distinguished engineer of IBM. So could you speak to some of the patents that you have and what is the innovation or the thing that you have captured for the world? The
Yeah.
lightning in
So,
a
I mean,
bottle, if you will.
well, I wish it was lightning in my wallet, but it never was. But yeah, so I worked with some guys when I was in Texas, some really smart folks, and we came up with a methodology and a piece of tech that would basically look at changes all the way down to kernel operating system on different machines, and it worked in cloud infrastructure and et cetera to some degree. And basically, it was call it next gen EDR before next gen EDR was a thing. So
Mhm.
that's why I say like I kind of wish I would have made a company out of it because we'd have done just fine.
Wow. And so earlier on your publications, you mentioned the Sinja. So what is the Sinja? And can you talk a little bit about the Sinja character?
Yeah. Yeah, so my partner there, Heather Dahl, who's an amazing person, she worked for the news orgs for a long time. She and I worked on this comic to kind of get kids to understand what cyber was, and it was a comic where it was very technically related. Like you see stuff in there about polymorphic malware and stuff like that.
Wow, for
Yeah, and
kids. Wow.
yeah, for kids, yeah, because we didn't want to talk down to them. We wanted to kind of
Mhm.
level them up. And we
I
did a
like that.
workbook
Level them
too.
up.
Yeah, we did a
Wonderful.
workbook that would teach them how to do like basic networking and some of that stuff and, Little Indian and whatever. But the whole thing was to get people, youth engaged in cyber and understanding what's going on. And it's been translated into 4 languages, sold pretty well on Amazon. Yeah. So I think, it was just really cool. Unfortunately, that showed me just how kind of skewed the market is because we even wound up building an app for parents and kids that was super secure, super encrypted, all that. No one wanted to use it. So, they would rather use
Oh,
TikTok or whatever. But
wow, what a shame to do something great like that for the public, and it's not as appreciated as it should be. I also have a note here that you're also a regular contributor to Military Technology Magazine as for the cyber section, right? So, what are some of the articles that you've done for them?
I've written about zero trust in the federal space. I've written about cyber warfare. I've done some stuff on drones. Basically, I think my contribution there has been pretty much in line with my cyber warfare book because that was a pretty good bit of research I did for that one. So it's just been educating people where I can on kind of what the reality of cyber warfare and these threats look like.
Hmm. So. This next question is going to be a little bit of a tricky question, and again, you can decline to answer. But since you do work within the federal defense spaces, right, and you're working on zero trust and strategy and then guidance and advice, we do have some recent comments, and it could have been taken out of context, but a comment from the Secretary of War had mentioned that when it came to cybersecurity training, he was like, enough of all this training. I'm paraphrasing, so I'm horribly paraphrasing, but basically the gist of the quote was, we got too much of this retraining and training. We need to focus on war fighting. So, what are your thoughts on, because I do see some merit in it. Even though I'm in cybersecurity, I do work for I'm a defense contractor, and so I do see value in training. But I don't think our training is the words I would use is it's not valuable. I see value in training, but I don't think the training itself is valuable, or a better word is relevant to the individuals anymore. And I think most people just do it because it's checking a box. They just brute force right through the training, or they'll go on Quizlet or ChatGPT the answers just to check the box. So therefore, all the money and time vested into this training is essentially worthless. And that's my perspective. But what is your perspective when it comes to the statements like this, where hey, we're putting too much into cyber, we need to focus on warfighting?
I mean, well, I would say that cyber is warfighting, and cyber is the actual domain where you reach out and touch the adversary now without putting boots on ground. So we honestly should be investing very heavily in our cyber warfighting capabilities. I'm a fan, honestly, of creating a cyber force outside of the other military branches, just like we did for Space Force, just because we need it and it would be useful. As far as all the training stuff goes, like I'm retired Navy. I do remember going through all the kind of asinine modules and all the other crap you had to do and whatever. Yeah, it's pretty worthless. And honestly, they would be better off moving towards better technology solutions like we talked about earlier. But, it's also one of those things of I'll never say don't train people because training is at least something.
Mhm.
But, I think you could massively operationalize and optimize the training that does go on in the Department of War. And then the other thing I would mention to the Secretary of War too is if you're going to look at the cyber training, you should also look at all the other dumb training that the military does and waste lots of time on because there's plenty of it.
There's plenty, and there's ways to always be better, right? And that's the goal. If every generation and every new person coming in makes things more efficient, makes it better, more resilient, more relevant, hey, I'm all for it because, like I said, we're gonna get older. I'm about to be 50 soon, and I do as much as I can to mentor, coach, and train young airmen and try to get them because they're our future leaders, right? And so you want to set them on the right paths. It's over just like a younger version of yourself came across an officer that saw your potential and set your trajectory on a different path, right? I want to take a moment in this is where I call my moment of levity, where we kind of take a pause on the technical discussion, and I just ask some rapid fire questions. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just for fun, and I love to do this with all my guests. So if you'll humor me, I'm going to hit you with some questions as the first answer comes to your mind.
Okay,
Okay.
let's go.
First one. This one splits every room. So Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Star Wars. Which trilogy of the Star Wars are you more of the fan of?
I actually like the new stuff.
The new stuff. What's your favorite character of Star Wars?
Gosh, the not the Emperor, but the other guy that was Darth something or another.
Darth Vader?
No, Darth Sidious, I think.
Darth
Yeah.
Sidious. Oh, okay. Okay, Darth Sidious. Cake or pie?
Pie.
What kind of pie?
Either apple or blueberry cobbler.
Hot or cold apple or blueberry cobbler?
Hot.
Hot. Okay. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yeah, it's meat with bread,
Meat
sure.
with bread. There it is. Chase says it's a sandwich. All right. What was your most favorite book of all time that you've read, and what was the last book that you've read?
Probably my favorite book most recently that I've read would be The End of the World is Just the Beginning. I think that that was a great one to kind of wrap your head around global economy sort of issues and demographic issues and whatever. Like I love the stuff that really makes me think big. So that was
Mhm.
awesome. I've read all his books now. And then most recently, I just read a book called Anji, which is about Xi Jinping. And it
Okay.
was very interesting because it was actually a guy's doctoral dissertation that lived in China for about 30 years. And he wrote this dissertation on Xi. And I learned so much about the thinking and the history and the kind of approach that the Politburo is taking to the global space that it was very, very enlightening for me.
Wow. And if you please provide me the links to those books as well, I'll have them in the description for folks. Um, One of the things I also like to ask my guests, with demanding careers such as yours and, traveling around the world, advising other partner nations and countries on zero trust and other cybersecurity strategy, you're a pretty busy fellow. But a lot of us do make time for what I call causes that are near and dear to our heart. It could be a volunteer work, a charity, a nonprofit, anything from, let's say, St. Jude's Cancer Research Hospital to, Wounded Warrior, etc. So is there a cause near and dear to your heart that you, what I like to say is shine a light on, and just to kind of mention them, and of course provide me their website and socials, and I'll put them in the description below.
Yeah, so I work with a group in Dallas, Texas called the High Ground Foundation, and what the High Ground Foundation is they take veterans from the military. A lot of them are special operations guys, SEALs and Rangers and Raiders, and they help them transition into jobs on the civilian side. Literally, even giving them apartments and food and stuff like that
Wow.
to get them set up. And I raise money for them all year round. If you look at my Patreon, 100% of any donations I get on Patreon go to that group at the end of the year. I'm getting ready to go down there in November and give them a pretty nice check. So I think that that's, and the reason I'm part of that is I know the founder, Clint Bruce. He's a friend of mine, SEAL team guy. I know 100% of every dollar goes to take care of people.
I love that. I love when we're able to shine a light on great organizations that, like you said, 100% goes to help our folks in uniform that are trying to make that transition, and that's just a wonderful thing. So, folks, please check out the links for that, Patreon, etc., for that organization, and check them out if you can donate. Because again, when these organizations do such great things in the world, we need more of that in our world, right? We always hear about the negativity in our world from the news, but it's moments like this where thank you for shining a light on a great organization there. Um, what's next for Dr. Chase Cunningham, aka Dr. Zero Trust? What's next in your next 6 months, 12 months? Do you have a book you're working on? Are you got a project that you could share with us? What's in your next 1,000 meters, if you will? What's coming up for you?
Well, I'm going to finish the third book in the Gabriel trilogy just because it's a trilogy, and I that bugs me that I haven't finished number three yet. So I'm working on that, and then I'm actually opening up an indoor golf facility business here in Virginia soon. So that'll be my kind of extra thing that's outside of cyber. I just needed a project that wasn't hardcore cyber all the time.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm working hard to get that one open. But it'll also be a place where I set up my podcast studio and everything else. So it's kind of it's selfishly things I really love doing, podcasting and playing golf.
Awesome. So we're pretty much wrapping up here. And so what I like to do for all my guests, and not to put you on the spot because this was not on the agenda questions. So I like to give all my guests the final word. So if you want to talk about zero trust, you want to talk about cybersecurity, you want to talk about anything under the sun, you can talk about the floor is yours.
The biggest thing I would say is number one, when you're looking at what's going on in the news and the media and everything else, is just think for yourself. Like you have to understand that nowadays reality is basically being manipulated digitally. So just understand what's going on there. And then the other thing that I would put in front of folks is doing cyber kind of better is not really that hard. Like you kind of live this way, so or at least you should. So just apply a lot of those rules to your, digital posture, and you'll be better off. The sad thing is that a rising tide does not lift all ships in cyber, but if I can be a harder target than the next easy one, I win. So just do that, and you're better off. And it doesn't take long to set up MFA or some of these other basic controls and save yourself a whole lot of misery.
Wow. Well said. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Cunningham, aka Dr. Zero Trust, for being a wonderful guest on the podcast. Thank you.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.